Okay. Okay. Hope everybody's okay. We had a
Yep.
quite interesting feedback so far from our today's note that how would you envision, like if you had to snap your fingers and make Israel exactly the way you want it, no problem. Snap your fingers and it becomes monarchy or anarchy or democracy or kingdom or whatever you want, whatever. How would you describe it, guys? How would you envision? Like, what kind of the country would you like it to be? And I said in my note, today versus 200 years from now. And the reason I said it because sometimes you might say, well, today, realistically, that's all I would like it like this, but I realize it may not be possible, so I like it like that. Or 200 years from now, either forward or back. I would have done it this way or that way. So it's kind of open format. I'll use the perplex interchange. So who wants to start? What do you think, guys?
Well, maybe you start.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, okay. I tell you honestly, for a long time, I really didn't know. If you asked me before, I don't know. I never thought about it. But as I thought about it, I changed my mind. Actually, I came to this idea, and then I changed it soon later. I mean, for me, I go by the Torah. But when you go by the Torah, it's not so easy because there is a 15 million Torah in the world. There are 15 million Jews, and therefore everybody sees Torah differently. So my opinion is only 1 in 15 million. But to me, I think, just my view, is that it should be basically the way it was coming from Egypt, what Torah envisioned. It will be Sanhedrin, there's a king. Sanhedrin basically, it's like Ayatollah, a republic, essentially. That theocracy, that basically all the religion made a decision done by the council, Sanhedrin. There's a king who takes care, he's also educated guy in Torah, and he takes care of war, takes care of building playgrounds and bridges and parks and factories, like civic type of things. And then every town had a little municipality. And municipality also guided by the Beis Din, by area that takes care of the local infrastructure. But then if religious things come up, somebody gets married or divorced, God forbid, or this and that, then the religious court, and that's what they do. That's what I thought. But then I modified my own view recently, thinking the Torah really didn't intend, I think, at my understanding, although I know many people will disagree with this, to even have a king. We're supposed to come from Egypt, go directly to Israel, without 40 years in the desert, with no temple, nothing. And a God will walk among you. In other words, we will feel what's right. We'll go by the Torah. We'll be good people without having to go to the temple, without having to do this. But because people couldn't handle, not everybody, like I'm not everybody has that elevated level that you can see what's right without having a written image or structure. Then God says, listen, you guys can handle like this. So fine, I give you the structure, I give you the building. And if you screwed up, if you stole or steal, you have to go make a korban, go to the temple. It's like little psychology, family counselor session. You go there, you bring the goat and you sacrifice the goat, and so okay, now you're absolved. Like a Catholic confession a little bit. And you come home and say, honey, I feel good. I went to Jerusalem and everything okay. Now the God says you have to call Chaim and tell him you're sorry. Okay, Chaim, I'm sorry. I really shouldn't mean this. Please apologize. Chaim said, you're forgiven. You still have to go to the temple. You still have to bring the goat. You still have to go say, excuse me, God. So I am struggling. Do you really need a king and all this structure, or you don't? I think because at this point, that's why now and 200 years from now, I think humanity is not easy right now for us to jump in and create. We have a mixture in Israel of Hilani, Dati, Semi-Dati, Semi-Hilani, Hasidim, Masidim, this. Overall, to snap the fingers and to do it the way I do it, I don't feel comfortable because not everybody shares my view. I can impose my view on somebody else. So it must be a natural process of little by little, we Jews will arrive to something that actually right. That's my 5 minutes, 5 cents talking, guys. Well, now it's up to you, to David and John.
Okay, John?
Yeah, well, the Jews were not the only people to have kings. They were actually imitating all the small nations surrounding them. The Jewish nation in Torah times was tiny.
Mm-hmm.
And it was surrounded by tiny, what are called petty kingdoms, sheikhs, I think we would call them now. And this was the accepted custom of society, at least in that neighborhood. There were other places where they didn't have kings, but we don't hear much about them. They tended not to be part of the mainstream of history.
But did they have, John, did they have guys at that time that did not have kings?
Yes, there were societies, there still are, where you choose the most prominent person in your community to lead you, but that person is not an inherited monarch. It doesn't run in a family.
Like elected.
Like a president, and can be deposed or retired or assassinated according to how badly they behave. But this occurs. But by and large, in this world of the Jews in Torah times, kingship on a small scale was the accepted pattern of behavior. The most obvious example, of course, is the pharaohs of Egypt. Egypt was a big country compared to the small countries in Israel. And they'd had kingdoms for, well, frankly, thousands of years. They started with 2 kingdoms and then they merged into one. So there were plenty of examples of kingship. And this is the story as I read it in the Torah is that the Jews asked to have a king. They were told they have a king in Min HaShamayim, in the heavens. They don't need another one, but they said, we want one to rule us on earth. So then they were given instructions on how a king should behave.
But you're saying also we asked for that, but if we didn't ask, Hashem was perfectly fine for us to go with a king in Shamayim. So we just couldn't handle that elevated, that high, right?
To do without a king, you have to be a very stable, secure society.
But isn't that the ultimate desire?
Sorry?
But wouldn't that be the ultimate desire to become or to move towards the society that is very, very perfect, very good?
Yes, perhaps. But in the meantime, we are here now. And human beings like to be led. They like to have leadership. They like to devolve the responsibility of taking the awkward, difficult decisions on somebody else.
So how would you do it? So having said that, and it's coming from the guy who is a former British subject, Your Majesty's British Empire subject.
Not so much the former. I am still a British subject.
Yes, I don't know which subject. I am Russian, American.
I still retain my British citizenship. I still retain, as well as my Israeli passport, my British passport, I still retain the right to vote in British elections.
So if you, in Israel, if you had to snap your fingers, how would you change the society from it is today? Or would you? Maybe not. David and I are giving you the power.
Okay.
Now they have a magic wand.
Let's stop talking fairy tale. Here's a practical suggestion. I would change the way we elect members of Knesset.
Okay.
I would choose a representative system, not a party system. They can belong to any parties they like,
okay.
But each district elects a representative to the Knesset based on population, based on natural borders to be determined by discussion. And if you have, say, for the sake of argument, 10,000 voting population, then they have the right to return one person to the Knesset.
It's somewhat similar. It's somewhat similar to American, kind of, right?
Well, needless to say, I'm basing my ideas on the British system,
Okay.
which is highly representative. There are two chambers, the House of Lords, which acts as an advisory but not a lawmaking facility, and House of Commons, who are representatives, very similar to Congress, yes.
Okay.
And they represent a district, a geographical area. So you have the member for Bromley South, where I live, and that his district votes for him.
Fascinating. Interesting.
And there are parties, so different parties put up candidates at an election. The point being that then the population, the electorate, has some influence on its elected representative, and they know who to turn to when they've got a complaint, they've got a problem. The members of parliament have what are called surgeries. They are open to their public, to their electorate, once a week. It's usually rather inconveniently on a Saturday morning, but there we are. And you can go along, you can make an appointment and go along, and you can speak to your member of parliament and say, I've got a problem with the drains in my street. And the local...
Or playground noise.
Or whatever. Or I don't like the way the government is running the railways, or whatever you like. And you can talk to your MP. And if the MP thinks you've got a serious problem, he or she can raise it in the House of Commons. And sometimes even get the law changed. Okay, it doesn't happen very often, you know, but it does happen. And in other words, you have a representative system. So you then accept the other side of the bargain is you pay your taxes to run the country. So in return for paying the taxes, you get a say in running the country. You get a representative who listens to you and speaks on your behalf. Of course, it's not perfect. It's the democratic system. And somebody once said, I think it was Churchill, that democracy is the worst of all possible forms of government, except for all the others.
Yeah. So
what alternative do you have? You could have a dictatorship, a tyranny, ruled by one family. You can have total chaos, anarchy. You can have the state controlling everything, like in China or North Korea. None of these appeal to any sensible person as the way to run a country. You can have elected members, representatives, who choose for you a leader, or as in America, you can directly elect your own chief leader. The American system works and has been working for a couple of 100 years now. More than that, 300 years.
Yeah.
Near enough. The other countries in Europe have variations on this theme. And the British system is peculiar, but it works perfectly well as a democracy. But if you add up all the democracies in the world, they are actually only a small proportion of the United Nations. Most of the United Nations members are autocracies, absolute monarchies, state dictatorships, or frankly, anarchic non-states. Just look at news headings and you can see it all around you. So democracy, in the forms that we're familiar with, has evolved to try and provide a fair and just system of government. And it fails very often, but it's the best system we developed so far. We being the human race.
So between John and I, we now represent Britain, Russia, America, and Israel. Now we're going to give the word to the true Sabra, to David. He is Israeli at the core. So now watch David snapping his fingers, and he's turning Israel into David.
Well, of course, an absolute monarchy. I'm not kidding. We live in times when democracy is dying. There's no doubt about it. And also, halachic Judaism is dying. which I think is wonderful. Um, yeah. So, I'll explain. We see democracy dying, um, and its death is called the woke culture and the culture of political correctness, which is now, it's basically the most, I would say, degenerate form of democracy ever to be presented in the world. Of course, it's not an official thing, it's an ideology. It bases itself on democracy, but it wants something completely different. It's basically democracy that demands dictatorship. And it's doing so by demanding things that are to be taken as democratic. And so we can see those things in the basically in the progressive left thinking. They claim to be the real representatives of democracy now, being extremely racist towards white people, towards heterosexuality as a natural category. They call this heteronormativity. Okay, so heteronormativity is basically not normal because it discriminates other people who are not heterosexuals. They're infiltrating schools and kindergartens to educate boys and girls that they can either turn to be the other sex, and they actually do this. They actively do this. They make all sorts of things, like in the kindergartens in Sweden, for instance, and this is called democracy. They call this democracy. So a democracy is not just a system of voting every 4 years to elect your parliament and your government. Democracy is when you give a boy the opportunity to be a girl, and everybody else has to admit that this is now a girl. And this girl has her place in girls' restrooms, real girls, biological females. Okay, and so this male can go into a biological female restroom. They can go to a biological female. How do you call this in English? Where they change the sports the sports that change their clothes.
Changing.
The changing rooms, the locker rooms, the changing rooms.
Locker rooms.
Yeah. And this entire, what is it known as, the LGBT and trans ideology is now the leading sort of, it's the leading arrow. It's the leading arrow in the new democracy. And it's just, well, not just that I believe that it's complete nonsense, but it's really taken the West by a storm. It's a cultural war, and they demand things that are, they actually demand things that are the end of democracy. For instance, you probably remember two years ago when this black person was killed by an American policeman, George Floyd. There were riots all over the United States by this group, Black Lives Matter, and they were considered, because they're black, they are, they are in this hierarchy of victimhood, which I don't have to tell you. Guys probably know about this hierarchy of victimhood. And we only have 40 minutes, so I'm not going to talk about it. But anyway, since black people are, they have their fair share in the hierarchy of victimhood, Western hierarchy of victimhood, they demanded to defund the police. So basically, no police. We don't need police because police are killing black people every 3 seconds.
It'll be like in Beersheba, police are essentially non-existent.
Yeah. So so this is where the West is going. This is the basically I don't see any other option right now but saying that this is the end of Western democracy as we know it from the days of Greece to now. Okay? And because they're educating young people to think in a very certain way, they don't really educate people to freedom of thought and freedom of speech. They only talk about hate speech and hate thought and crime thought and how to avoid those things to not to not offend other people. It's like being ultra nice, being completely like a saint that is not flawed in any way and that accepts everybody and is all for diversity and inclusion. That's much more important than personal freedom and to say what you actually think. Free thought is now a danger in the West. And it's a very, very big danger from where you're coming from, John, because a few months ago, a man was arrested in the center of London for standing in the street and quoting Churchill. So that's the end of democracy there. Now, the end of halachic Judaism, now that's a subject I like even more. Today, I have to say that, and Lev knows this now for many, many months, that my heart sort of is torn between the two factions of Judaism, the rabbinical Judaism and the Karaite, but I sort of tend towards the Karaite Judaism. It's a form of Judaism that doesn't accept the Torah Sheba'al Peh, basically the halacha as we know it from the Mishnah through the Talmud and to the Shulchan Aruch, which is the basic book from which halacha is still derived, is still making they're still making halachic judgment from this very book. How would you say psak halacha in English, Lev? A psak. No, it doesn't matter.
A quote, a position.
No, like decision making.
Decision, yeah.
Yeah, I would say decision making in halachic Judaism. Now, why halachic Judaism is dying? Well, the reason is that there are, now that a few months ago, the Rabbi Kanievsky died, there are no real, and of course, a few years ago when Rabbi Ovadia Yosef died, there are no real leaders in the halachic world. Now, the halachic Judaism is the mainstream of Judaism. Most Jews today are not Karaites. Karaite Jews, which basically Karaite Jews only go by the written Torah. So the Pentateuch is the Torah for them. The Talmud, they know the Talmud. Sometimes some people of the Karaites they study the Talmud, but it's not halacha to them. It's not the Jewish law to them, which is totally opposed to halachic Judaism, to rabbinical Judaism, which goes by the Talmud. If you go into a yeshiva and you ask for a Bible, they're gonna have a hard time finding you a copy of the Bible. But they have, like, you see what's behind Lev? That's the Talmud there. I don't see a Bible there, but you probably have one, but I don't see it. I see lots of Talmud. That's the same thing as in yeshiva. You probably have the Torah, right? You have the Pentateuch, the Chumash.
I have
But
to.
where's the okay? So what of those is the Bible?
You mean probably Chumash? Oh, you mean
No, 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 no,
Tanakh?
no, 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 no,
Tanakh?
no. I mean, no, I mean the Tanakh,
That's
whereas you
Tanakh.
have the book of the Judges and the
Yeah,
Kings
yeah,
and Tehillim and everything.
that's
Well,
Tanakh.
okay, we all have one at home, okay, but when you go to yeshiva, they're going to have a hard time getting you a copy of the full Bible.
Yeah.
But the walls are completely covered with Talmud books. So the Talmud, they don't care about the written Torah, and that's the written Torah is not important. There is even a principle in halachic Judaism that says halacha okeret mikra, which means halacha can basically not cancel, but
Supersede.
it supersedes it supersedes the commandments of the Pentateuch, of the Torah given to Moses.
Can I interject something real quick? Yeah,
Yeah.
I can resist on a little bit of light note. Like there's a discussion between like one, two rabbis and 10 rabbis. 9 rabbis saying we should go to the right, and one rabbi says we're going to the left. And so they say, listen, we want to make a democratic way. We're going to ask God. And which way? Let's see what God says. And the God comes and says, Rabbi Yochanan is correct. That's the guy who says going to the left. So Rabbi says, okay, so it's 9 against 2.
Exactly. So Karaite Jews don't accept that. They accept that the Torah is the word of God, and what's in the Torah, that is the law for Israel. Now, there's many reasons. I'm not going to get into all those. I think there's at least a couple of videos where I talked about it. So, I don't want to get it because we don't have much time. But I think
That's why we love your notes, because we'll extract from our many lessons David's things, and that by itself will be a great book. Yeah.
I think that halachic Judaism, okay, rabbinical Judaism, is essentially one of the reasons to the weakness of Am Israel. It doesn't make us stronger, it makes us weaker. And the more we go by the Talmud, and the more we fall into the idolatry of the Kabbalah, the more we will, um, uh, the more we'll get weaker as a nation in all other fields, in the fields of politics, in the fields of security, everything.
And I think we'll agree the root of that has come from the fact that they're not the members of the Perplexed club. Because if they join our club, they will know that they can have any views they want, and they're going to be criticized, or killed, or mocked, and ridiculed. We'll love them all.
So what I wanted to say also that all of the, just like Lev said, today there is all of the factions in the Jewish people, from the traditional Lithuanian sort of Haredim through to the Hasidic movement, and all through the Masorti, the traditional Jews, and also conservative and Reform Judaism. These are all forms of rabbinical Judaism. So conservative and Reform, they also, they acknowledge and recognize the reign, if you can say so, the reign of Talmudic Judaism. So when you go into a conservative yeshiva or conservative synagogue or a reform, what they are speaking about, what they want to reform, is the Talmudic halacha. So they accept the Talmud as it is, but they just want to reform it to make it, more modern.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like trying to make a new Talmud, a new Torah Sheba'al Peh, by canceling many things in the Talmud. Nobody's talking about the laws of Moses. The laws of Moses is like, I don't even know how to describe it in the Talmudic vision. It's like a metaphor or a metaphorical basis for the halacha.
You know,
Okay.
guys, I would
So no,
say,
I will
good,
just finish
good.
because of the what we call the machloket. The big thing in Judaism is the machloket, right? Machloket is the disagreement, right? The disagreements in the Mishnah,
You
the
have
disagreements in the
you have to
Talmud.
pronounce properly, Maclocus.
Machlokus, big machlokus. So because the machlokus has become the culture of the oral Torah, so the Talmud is the oral Torah. Because of that, we have sort of become a nation that is only divided by machlokus, and that's the central weakness, as far as I'm concerned, about halachic Judaism. We already have. If you're a religious Jew and you say there is such a thing as the word of God, but I choose to go by the word of rabbis, there is something inherently wrong with your religiosity. Okay, this is the strength of our Muslim neighbors. They go by the Quran. For them, the Quran is the first thing, and only then, if they cannot answer a question by the Quran, then they go to the Hadith and the Surahs, which is the oral Torah for them.
Mm-hmm.
But most questions are answered, as far as they are concerned, by the Quran. By the way, they also have many books of Hadith, but they go by the Quran, which is the Word of God. And if our Word of God is the Torah, then we should go by that, and that will only strengthen us as a nation, not in a religious form, but it's going to change the culture and get rid of the machlokas. Democracy is dead in Israel. You cannot. It's irrelevant in the state of Israel now.
Yeah,
it's become irrelevant. For 3 years we have not been able to elect a prime minister.
Yeah.
And now once the one of the factions is actually won, the other faction says, well, this is the death of democracy, because Benjamin Netanyahu is now prime minister again, and the right wing is won, 64 to 56 to 56 or something. So democracy is dead. That's not the way. That's not the way democracy. This is not an environment in which democracy can work.
All right. Well, let me jump.
We need absolute monarchy. Yeah.
What I love about both you, John, and David points, because it's interesting. This is what I personally love about our club, the Perplexed, because remember, as we evolved, like dynamically we started, we have people with different opinions, and our initial thing was a little bit of a clash. We argue, no, you're wrong, you're wrong. And how we can come? This is the way we have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and yet we kind of came with a common denominator. We're all kind of expressing the same general idea of, basically, to me, what tells me, regardless what form of government we need or not. David very nicely started with his view, how it should be, then he explained why, and then he finished with that. John also gave a specific example, how a particular system operates and comparing other operations. And then we came back and we said, okay, well, this is one thing about what we have. We exchange of views. We don't push one opinion against the other. It was interesting for me to hear what David said. It was interesting to hear what John said.
But that's not. Yeah, but the thing is, you always repeat this. Now this thing that, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. It's okay between people, but we're not. The question that you raised about how a country should be is more than interpersonal relationships. It's more than me respecting you and respecting John for having a different opinion.
Every time
if we're trying to design or redesign a society, so first of all, there's a limit to how much you can design, because you don't want to go completely tyrannical, which I don't want to see Israel as a dictatorship. I don't think that absolute monarchy has to be a dictatorship. It's two completely different things.
Yeah, well,
And
I got it. I got it. We got it. I like what you said, because several times you bring out that I bring this point. I hear what you're saying. Let me know, because I only have 4 minutes. Let me say, this is just all my view. I like also element of lightness we'll put to this. We're not, and it's interesting. I had an exchange today. I just want to share with you guys, because I think it's funny. You have to be a little bit light. Life is too short to be too serious. We have to take it easy with a joke a little bit. So I was looking today when I sent a note about a meeting, and I said it was the subject is like, what kind of system we'd like to see. And somebody, I'm not going to call the name, so I don't say Loshen Harav. Somebody said, I send a note like to 100 people. On my email goes to 100 people I know personally, some not personally. And the guy said, not interested in listening to the prejudice at this time. Okay, so I said to him, and immediately I shared with my wife, said, what do you think? And my wife immediately said, Lev, you're out of line. You didn't have to respond like that, because my wife always tells you, Lev, you have to clamp it. But I had to share with you guys, with my friends. So I said, thank you. I will remove you from the distribution list and enter you into a no prejudice list to make sure you are not bothered by our group's nonsense. Most of our guys are not so bright, and they still did not arrive at the height of understanding and the thinking of what did Torah mean, the ultimate structure of Israel society would ultimately be, is prejudice at this time. I'm sure silly us will eventually realize our smallness. Many of us do find it interesting to exchange our views on how each would like to see the world. But at the same time, we'll also realize that it can be banned from the Facebook. I remember that Stalin used to do that to my grandfather. So Adrian jumped in, and I wish Adrian was here with us, because Adrian, if you're listening to review, we missed it today. You have this. So Adrian says, by the way, who is this person and what prejudice is he objecting to? What is his angle? I bet it's a very narrow angle, probably no more than 15 degrees. So I'm responding to Adrian. I'd say the angle is 8 degrees. I know the beer is about 4 degrees and vodka around 40 degrees. Today, my cousin and I went hiking in the desert, and it was about 20 degrees, so we stayed warm and had fun. I think it's all about the level of pedigrees or degrees, but then again, it might be the opposite. Then Adrian said from London, it's 0 degrees in London right now. As we say, it's cold enough to freeze something, the brass monkey. So anyway, we continue that conversation, and it's interesting that how it emphasizes David's point, I think, sometimes, that sometimes we'll go so seriously into structure and defend every letter, everything, that for God, the life is not just about studying, but to respect another human being. And I would say, don't want to be Loshen Hara, Chatz v'Chalila, and not to put David on the spot, but a couple of times, this is how we don't judge, but this is how I judge. A couple of times I needed help. And I called, David came in and helped me to move something from one apartment to another. I needed help, no question. And if he asked me to help me something, I'll do it if I physically can. I came from America already like 5-6 years ago. Very few people who I thought were my friends never even called me to see how I'm adjusting here. Halachic Jews. So when then I'm looking, this is how I see the world should or should not act. How do you actually come? Like I was there for 15, 20 years. Nobody called, how are you doing? I mean, I'm not saying like I'm complaining about it, but it's all like you're studying Talmud all day long. You don't have a minute to call Lev. How are you doing? I didn't hear from you for 5 years. So 15 seconds left. Well, I didn't want to end on Morose tone. This is great discussion, guys. Next Tuesday, 8 o'clock Israeli time, 1 o'clock US time, we'll continue. Suggest the topic. Love you guys.
Bye.
Okay.